Vitaliy, welcome back to the show. Always good to see you.
Dan, my friend, it's my pleasure.
So it's been a little while since you've been on the show. Last time we talked about your latest book, which it's a life book. It's not really an investing book, although certainly it does. Certainly those ideas impact investing too.
Mhm.
Do you have any more books in the works?
I'm working. Actually, it's kind of funny you say this. I'm
Yeah.
finishing another book,
Really?
and and it's a working title is called "What a Life,"
What a life.
and as you can guess, it's not about investing either. So
So you're just getting out of the investing game entirely. You're going to write these books for the rest of your life.
no, I kind of like the investing game. I can only write about 2 hours a day, so listen. I write 2 hours a day every day, so I just finished 18-page investment letter, which you read parts of it.
Mm-hmm.
So that was a letter to my clients. So it was all about investing. Just if you write an investment book, you have to have something very new to offer. And I feel like I'm not sure I have a book worth of ideas about investing.
That's sort of interesting. I kind of know what you mean, but certainly I get emails from you all the time about investing, and it's a book worth of emails a year, right?
Yeah, no, I think when you write a book, the standards are much higher, and
Yeah.
you need to have an arc.
Yeah.
So I have a lot of ideas. If you invest for a living, you have a lot of ideas. A lot of them are very timely ideas, which are not really book worthy. But also, when you write a book, you need to have this arc of evergreen ideas. I'm not sure I have a book worth. Yeah.
Right. So does that mean that you, like, it makes me want to ask you how you've evolved as an investor, because I've known you for a long time. You've been at this game for a while now. And and this discussion has me wondering if you've meaningfully changed how you do investing over the past, I don't know, 10, 15, 20 years.
I think today I'm a very different investor than I was 5, 10, 15, 20 years ago.
Okay.
I have evolved tremendously. And as I should, right? I think every investor should evolve over time. I think just what's great about investing is a kind of a contact sport, right? Because you're in a constant contact with the market, and that gives you feedback. And and a lot of times your successes and your failures give you feedback, and then you process that and say, okay, this is what I used to think, but now I realize that I need to tweak my thinking a little bit. So when I started out, and I think this is probably true for most value investors, including Warren Buffett, we start out as kind of dumpster divers.
Yeah.
We go for this statistically cheap,
Right.
crappy companies. And I think it's actually the reason we do this, I think, because at this point, we don't, like when we start out, we don't have experience.
Right.
And the only experience we have, most of us passed second grade algebra or whatever, so math, we know that 10 is greater than 5. Okay. So, and that 30 is greater than 20. So you start out as a statistical investor, statistical value investor.
Yeah.
Over time, you learn qualitative parts of investing. You understand the value of the moat, the value of good management versus bad management, the value of growth. So I think over time I became a more holistic investor, or more well-rounded investor. So, and I found that some things today are uncompromising for me. I'll give an example. I found that my emotional quotient, my rationality, is very low when I own deeply cyclical crappy companies. So guess what? I don't own them. And by the way, this is the beauty of investing. Like, and I think about it, you and I might have talked about this. Like if you are a surgeon and you are a orthopedic surgeon, you can't really, and you discover that you are so much better working on the right knee than the left knee. You can't really say, you know what, I'm just going to specialize in right knees, right? You can't do that. As an investor,
Right.
I need 25 stocks in my portfolio. So I can say I'm only going to specialize in right knees, or I'm only going to specialize in high quality companies because my emotional quotient is the highest. I'm the most rational.
Mm-hmm.
So what's interesting, and I look at my evolution as both, as a writer, as an investor, and see if you can relate to this. As a writer, over time, I feel like I have a lot more courage and a lot more, what's the word I'm looking for? A lot more courage to do more,
Mm-hmm.
to conquer topics that were in the past were kind of off limits for me.
Yeah, you give
Like
yourself permission. Yeah.
Yes, thank you. I give myself, that's what I was looking for. Give myself permission to conquer topics that were kind of outside of what I'm supposed to write about, right? Like I'm an investor, supposedly I should only be writing about investing. But, I've been writing about classical music, life, parenting, all different topics.
Mm-hmm.
However, as an investor, as I matured, I give myself a permission to do less, to know what my circle of competence is,
Mm-hmm.
where I'm the strongest, and say no a lot more. That's kind of that's been a significant evolution for me. Now, when somebody pitches me a stock and I say, "Listen, this is such an incredible retailer, but I don't do retail."
Right. Yeah, I think what you describe is, and that Buffett went through it too. I think that's the sort of typical. If you eventually get the idea right, that is the typical evolution. And we've seen. I think a lot of people have done this. A lot of people in the show have talked about it, where they start out. They might even start out, looking at chart patterns and trying to guess when the stock is going to go up or whatever. And then they say, well, that got me in big trouble. So then I went on and became a statistical or quantitative value investor. And that got me in trouble. So then I learned what a good business was.
Yeah.
And now I just want to own good businesses. So,
yeah, I feel like I started in a good neighborhood of value investing, but it just I kind of now I limit it to a fewer blocks
mm-hmm.
where I feel the most comfortable in those blocks. By the way, I just came from Berkshire Hathaway.
Oh.
And I spent some time with Bob Robotti. And Bob is a phenomenal investor.
Yeah.
He's been in it for a long time. And he loves deeply cyclical companies.
Mm-hmm.
He the more cyclical it is, the better it is for him. And I realized both Bob and I could be doing value investing,
mm-hmm.
and we have different experiences, we have different skill sets, and he'll do great owning deeply cyclical stocks. And if I did what he did, I would do horrible. I would just not do a good job, and that's okay.
Yeah, you can have 10, 20, 100 value investors and none of them own the same stuff. It's, it's a very broad categorization.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. It makes you wonder what it really means. What does it really mean to be a value investor then? If you could, if you can buy mining stocks or, Berkshire Hathaway and high quality company, what does it mean to be a value investor?
Oh, that's to me, that is so simple. Value investing is a philosophy. Really, it's kind of an approach. It's an approach to things. Okay. And there are some tenets, we can discuss them, but it's basically you have a long-term time horizon. Okay, all value investors I know have a long-term time horizon. You're looking for margin of safety. So you want to buy companies that are undervalued. Now, I didn't say cheap. I just say undervalued. You can have cheap stocks that are actually expensive, and you can have statistically expensive stocks that are cheap, but undervalued kind of unites them. Okay, so they're undervalued. You are the Mr. Market is there to serve you and not another way around. In other words, you realize when I come to work, I'm going to see a lot of volatility. And a lot of times it means very little. And I try to take advantage of that. So this kind of philosophical, I actually wrote an essay, 6 Commandments of Value Investing. And if your readers look for 6 Commandments of Value Investing, they'll find it. You can they can read it. Yeah.
All right. What, do you want to share a commandment or two with us?
Oh, I just did. You did margin of safety.
Okay.
You need to have long-term time horizon. Mr. Market is there to serve you.
Okay.
Another one is in the long term, stock prices kind of come back to their fair value.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm probably, and there's a couple more, but I'm just spacing out the other 2.
Okay. Well, that's cool. Thanks. Do you have anything to say about Buffett's retirement? I know you've been to the meeting many times. What do you?
Yeah, that's what I was going to ask you too. You were there, right?
Yeah. So I'm going to tell you 2 stories. So I'm going to answer the question about the Buffett's retirement. That guy is so brilliant because a lot of times he does things, and then you look at this and say, "Oh my God, it makes so much sense." Like that was the only way to do it, kind of thing. Mm-hmm. So, he's 94. He's going to be 95 in August. Still basically answered questions for 4 hours, which is incredible. But he knows that has a lot that, let's be honest, he has, I hope he lives until he's 150, but that's not how the world works.
Yeah.
So he knows that the best way to transition the company from him to Greg is to actually while he's still alive, because it would be a lot less disruptive. However, Buffett did it in a very brilliant way. He's still a chairman, and Greg is CEO, and I would imagine even on January 1st next year, if Buffett is in good health, nothing is going to change from what it is today. Because think about it, Berkshire is a very decentralized company. Mm-hmm. It's not like Buffett of the last 2 years ago, even this year or 5 years ago, was actually kind of visiting, each division and making sure that Borsheim's is run well, etc. Right. He doesn't. He does. But he's sitting there reading newspapers and looking for stock ideas. Really, that's what he does. I don't think anything is going to change. No. So if 3 years from now, Buffett is in good health, he's the chairman, Greg is really kind of CEO and COO, really. Mm-hmm. But in doing what he was doing today, and Buffett is still the one who is making whatever big investment decisions. That's right. So he did it in a very brilliant, kind of very delicate way. So yeah, but the second part of the story, and this is the sad part, and this is so imagine I've been going to Berkshire Hathaway for 17 years. 17 years, show up, spend 3 days in Omaha. It's like a 17-year soap opera. Okay, listen to it. Okay, so last Saturday, and so what happened this year, they changed the format. Somehow they started things earlier. There was no movie preview. That's usually the first hour. Right. Everything kind of gets screwed up. So at 12 o'clock, I 3 minutes to 12, I told my friends, let's leave a little bit earlier so we can get out and go to lunch. Okay, so because I figured like the lunch is going to start in 3 minutes, and then and then we will come back at 1 o'clock. That's what usually happened in the past. Yep. And then we leave, come back at 1 o'clock, and I read that Buffett announced that he's retiring. Yeah. So, for 17 years, I was attending this meeting, and I missed the finale, basically. Yeah. Anyway, so that's so I have to admit that I was not there when he announced his retirement.
Well, you got to eat though, so that's okay.
I know.
Yeah, I was in the same zip code, I guess. Yeah.
Yeah.
But anyway, so it's
That's funny. That's hilarious. So the company, you don't expect the company to change much, which makes sense.
Yeah, like let's talk about Berkshire a little bit.
Mhm.
We are shareholders,
Mhm.
but I gotta be honest, I am not really enthusiastic about the stock.
Yeah.
I mean, it's fully valued, and it doesn't really, like, I would expect future returns probably maybe better than the market, just because the market is more overvalued than than the stock.
Mhm.
But I'm not necessarily like I look at individual divisions, like I look at Geico,
Mhm.
and over the last couple of years it was kind of losing market share to Progressive. Then you look at Burlington Northern, Santa Fe, and that railroad is not as nearly well run as other railroads. You can look at the efficiency ratios, and you can see it's undermanaged. Like the reinsurance business, which is run by Jane, and that's really kind of, he's probably more important to Berkshire today
Mhm.
than Buffett,
Yeah.
in all honesty.
Yeah.
And I saw him on stage, and he's probably mid-70s, and he didn't look particularly healthy, in all honesty.
Yeah.
And so if you go back and watch when he was answering questions, you can just see he was not he has some kind of neurological disorder or something. I mean, just so.
Huh.
So you look at Ajit and you say, like, he runs the biggest, the most important division in the Berkshire, and if he's no longer there, how is that going to do? So I don't know. I don't know who's going to replace him, etc. So I look at Berkshire, and also, like, it's kind of funny. As a consumer, outside of eating Sis candy, you and I really can't really consume a lot of their products, except maybe buying Geico insurance or something. But there's one product that I consume all the time when I travel is Dairy Queen, because they own Dairy Queen, and I'll be honest, those stores are really poorly run, like, just so in my experience. And so if this is just a little reflection of what's happening in other businesses, then I say, so maybe it's a good thing actually that Greg is taking over, and it's probably going to have probably more hands-on, more hands-on on what he's doing on operations.
Mm-hmm.
But again, it's a conglomerate, right? Some businesses are better than others. So I look at this and I say, well, it's 1.7 times book, whatever. It's not overly exciting investment.
Yeah, and overall, Buffett has said some of the things that you've said. He said, well, we expect to beat the S&P 500, but it's not going to be anything like what it was. And, Ajit is more important than I am. Yeah, and a couple, so he's made some of the same observations.
Then one more thing about Berkshire, Buffett made an incredible investment in Apple stock.
Oh,
and
yeah.
I would and he confessed that Tim Cook actually created more value for Berkshire than he did over the last 5 or 7 years. And I think that played out. And Buffett brilliantly sold most of his Apple stock.
Mm-hmm. It's interesting because I saw Tim Cook. Tim Cook stood up and he was in the audience, and I thought, wow, that's interesting. It's like Buffett sells 90% of his position, and Tim Cook still shows up, and it's sort of
I was there last year when, like, Tim Cook was still there, and they announced on CNBC that Buffett reduced their position in Apple, and you see this weird, surreal, like, I had this surreal experience. I see Tim Cook looking at a huge display that showed that Buffett, that Warren Berkshire Hathaway reduced position in Apple, and just kind of surreal was seeing it last year.
That is it's surreal. Yeah. Tim Cook at the Berkshire meeting watching a screen reducing the position. That's something.
Yeah, I can imagine. I remember watching that one and him and those reports on the TV and him standing down there on the floor talking to everybody. I was like, oh, I wonder what he's thinking. So
that's right.
And to me, I wonder, I wonder how much, Buffett does what he has done, just, more than doubling the cash position, like more than tripling off of from one point, to what it is today. How much, like, I'd really like to pick his brain exactly what that's about. What he comments on TV and say, well, we don't time the market and any of this stuff. I'm like, you really don't? I don't know. It's, I just think all the timing of that with other things is kind of interesting to me.
I can explain it. To me, this is so simple.
Yeah.
Because this is what I experience, like in my running portfolios.
Mm-hmm.
The exception, I mean, Buffett I'm not Buffett, obviously, but unlike Buffett, I don't have constraints of that every decision I make has to be in $10 billion increments.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so I just look. I am looking for stocks to buy. I'll give you an example. We get all our portfolios here as different from each other, and the biggest difference is when we get the money. So when we get new money today, we are only 50% invested. 50.
Mm-hmm.
And the rest is sitting in cash. I'm not timing the market. I'm just literally, I have a list of stocks that I'm buying, and I'm buying them at certain prices, and the prices are just higher than, than above my buy levels. So, and I'm looking globally, and I don't need to buy in $10 billion increments. So I think what it is, it's a market timing in the sense that if market was cheap, he would be buying. If he saw opportunities, he would be buying. Obviously, you're going to see more opportunities when there's a market sell-off.
Mm-hmm.
When the market is making, not that far from all-time high, 5 or 10% from all-time high, then you're going to see few opportunities. And I think that's what really is happening.
Right. I wonder when that's going to happen. Oh, go ahead.
I heard our Whitney Tilson did an interview yesterday, and he mentioned something similar. Like, they just have to, when they do something, it has to be so big that those opportunities just haven't come up. I just wonder. That's the big question everybody's asking. Like, what will they do with this huge cash pile eventually? What do you think?
I suspect that at some point they're gonna either stop buying back stock, or maybe do like one-time dividend kind of thing. Because at some point people will look at this cash pile and say, if you can't put it to work and you have now $500 billion of cash or whatever you might as well return to shareholders in the stock, if depending on what the stock price is.
Right. You don't think they'd buy back stock with it? You think they'd pay it out?
It depends on the stock price, right? If they think the stock price is it's not that attractive, they'll probably just pay a dividend.
Right.
So you can buy something else with that.
Yeah, I have trouble believing they'll do that as long as Buffett's alive.
Oh, I agree with you.
Yeah.
No, I agree with you. No, I was talking about kind of post-Buffett. Yeah, right. I agree with you.
Yeah, I've also heard people suggest that post-Buffett, there's a potential to break it up and spin pieces of it off.
It's very much possible, and I think to protect against this, the chairman is going to be Warren Buffett's son, Howard Buffett, if I remember right. That's why he's trying to protect from that.
I see. So if that's that sounds reasonable, and if that's the case, I remember one time, guys, this was many years ago. It might have been 15 years ago or so, but a very savvy investor named Rahul Saryogi, who's been on the program, he said, Buffett's building an endowment. And I thought, that's an interesting way of looking at this. And the idea of putting Howie in the chairman spot so that they don't break it up kind of speaks to that a little bit.
I agree.
Yeah, it's interesting. Well, he certainly had a heck of a run, unlike anybody else. I mean, and it's the I think it was Jason Zweig and a couple other folks have written. It's the combination of the return, the 19.9% compounded, versus the longevity of it, just for decades and decades and decades. That combination just has not existed, and it's amazing. And the part of Jason Zweig's article recently, it was titled, I think the title was "Why There Will Never Be Another Warren Buffett."
Yeah.
And it's
Then what's funny about this story?
what?
That you say all this,
Mm-hmm.
and this is a guy who did all this to make things even more grander.
Mm-hmm.
He did this while drinking cherry Coke, eating burgers, and cis candy,
and saying, "I don't exercise," until very recently.
saying, I don't exercise.
Yeah.
It was just like he won a genetic lottery when it came to his health.
Yep.
But that is doing this such a great style, I would argue. If I couldn't, like, let's say I had all his other genetics,
Mm-hmm.
but if I did this, I probably would have croaked at at 65.
Yeah, you and me both. I mean, I have great genetics. Both of my parents lived to be in their 90s, but I would really not like to bet on getting away with that for 90 years. It's just incredible. But yeah, what an amazing guy. And the other thing that Zweig pointed out was that he's just completely unusual. He decided at a very early age to forego any semblance of a normal social life or a normal family life. I mean, he really is a highly, highly unusual individual. And that was another reason why he said, it's so, you can't expect anybody to live this way.
And could I add to this?
Sure.
I personally made a decision. I don't want to live that way.
Mm-hmm.
I remember one of the most important books I ever read in my life was Snowball by Alice Schroeder, which is a biography of Warren Buffett.
Yeah, great book.
And that book was the most important book for me because this is when I realized I don't want to be like Buffett. Like, I read it early enough that my kids were very young, and I realized that Buffett is both a hero and anti-hero for me.
Mm-hmm.
And he was an anti-hero in a sense that he basically achieved all that at the expense of spending time with his children,
mm-hmm.
which for me was a kind of a compromise I was not willing to make. And to me, that would be like if I did this, it would be a giant hole in my life.
Yeah.
So I think that was probably one of the most important lessons I learned from him as well. And one thing important about this, and then you commented in my article about nuance.
Yeah.
And
great.
Nuance,
very timely.
Nuance is the ability to see this, right? Is to look at somebody and say, I respect Buffett and here's what I can learn from him of what to do.
Mm-hmm.
Both look at him and say, oh, and this is what I can learn of what not to do. An ability to say, this is a person who is not perfect, because people aren't. And I can learn, and whether Buffett is it's a kind of an easy example, right? Because he's expression actually respect. But also there's many other examples where, and I think I mentioned in the article, like the Henry Ford, who revolutionized car industry
mm-hmm.
and U.S. manufacturing, was horrific human being, I would argue, because he was anti-Semitic, horrible human being, and still there's a lot you can learn from him.
Mm-hmm.
You and I love classical music, and Richard Wagner was huge, very anti-Semitic as well. And some Jewish people choose not to listen to his music. In my case, I see both sides of it, and I choose to listen to his music.
Mm-hmm.
So, but it's seeing nuance and saying that even horrible people may have something for you to learn from.
Right.
And there's like one of my favorite quotes is from a person who, to me, is on par with Hitler, which is Joseph Stalin.
Mm-hmm.
And his quote is, "There is certain quality in quantity." Okay, so Stalin killed probably as many people as Hitler did.
Yeah, tens of millions.
And so anyway, so this is kind of the nuance of things.
Yeah, and there's a really great philosophical point in here, which is This is the reason why trade is so good, because trade is the point in time and space when two individuals or countries or organizations can meet in the middle. You can disagree on everything, but if you agree on the price and the quantity of what the goods or services that you trade, that's the best that human beings can do, is to trade.
I think that's a great point. That is a brilliant point. I think
Yeah.
you're so right about this.
Yeah.
In a new book I'm writing about Elon, like I'm kind of use it like a few times in the book. I refer to Elon Musk, and a few people who read the early copies, they said, "Are you sure you want to be actually like I'm just kind of things like I learned from Elon Musk, it's
Right.
like first principles and a few other things."
Yeah.
And people are like, "Are you sure you actually want to be mentioning Elon Musk, especially what's happening today?" And I said, absolutely. I'm quoting Stalin. I mean, what?
They didn't say Stalin. They said Musk. That's
Yeah. So, he's not Stalin.
yeah. Stalin's okay, but God, Elon Musk, boy.
Oh, yeah.
It is really, yeah. I know. It's amazing how quickly that turned from all the people who wanted a Tesla to now are going, what's going on? And I feel different about it, and don't have the nuance to, you hear offhand jokes about it, and people trying to talk around it, but it's such a great point, man.
Yeah, and I'm glad you brought this up so I could make the point about trade, because I just didn't understand it when I was younger. I thought, yeah, we shouldn't trade with Cuba or something dumb like that, and I thought, well, that's the reason why you don't embargo the bad countries, because you want as much, even if 80% of the goods go into the hands of the top people, like always happens with these corrupt countries, something will reach the people, right? Like something reached the people who were east of the Iron Curtain, namely fax machines. Fax machines played an enormous role in the falling of the Iron Curtain in the late 80s there.
So, what's kind of interesting, when I grew up in Soviet Union, I grew up hating America, which is like, no, like this is not.
Yeah.
It was not unique to me. It was the whole Soviet Union hated America.
Yeah.
Because I was brainwashed to hate America, and then after the fall of the Berlin Wall, the American movies made to America. I mean, made to Soviet Union, and I remember watching these movies, and it's humanized Americans, and it changed how Soviets start to look at Americans, because you almost felt like Americans are genetically evil. So no, I mean, it's like that's this is what happens when you're brainwashed, and then you find out that Americans are just not that much different. So I got to tell you a funny story. So most American movies take place on the East Coast or West Coast. So it's either skyscrapers or palm trees, like especially of the 80s, okay? It's a kind of a Tango and Cash and versus, I don't know, something else. And then I arrived to Denver. And I had such a shock, because Denver looks nothing like East Coast or West Coast. There's no palm trees, no skyscrapers. It's flat.
Yep. Surrounded by mountains. Yeah.
That's right. Yeah, especially the airport. Yeah, it's
exactly.
Yeah. You go.
All right.
Can we get back to just a little bit of the part you learned from Buffett that I don't want his personal life, essentially. I feel like that's such an overlooked part of investing, and just how you're able to balance, I don't know, either the interests of what you're invested in, the time that you put into it, the emotional energy you have to spend involved in it, versus like, if you wanted to, you could sit in front of a computer 12 hours a day or 24 hours a day and trade and do whatever you want. But like that balance between breaking from that and then having like a real life with a family, with kids, I don't know. How do you think about that philosophically? Just why is that so important?
Well, I mean, first of all, so people who go into investing, and by the way, what I'm about to say, even though I'm going to use investing as an example, but it applies to almost any profession.
Right.
If you are obsessed about anything you're doing, okay, and then the rest of the world can get pushed out, right? You could be an artist, you could be a painter, you could be a litigator. And if you absolutely have soul in the game, if you have soul in the game and you're obsessed about it, then it just, you get sucked in, and it occupies the kind of all real estate in your mind. And even though, like, and I'm speaking for myself, even though like being with my kids kind of important to me, it just kind of get pushed out by inertia. So knowing that, I created these guardrails in my life. So, and those guardrails kind of help me to make sure that when my obsession takes over, kind of my addiction to investing takes over, there are certain, that I still have, it doesn't take over my life completely. So there are certain things I do, and my two older kids out of the house. My youngest one is still, she's 11. So I drive her to school every single day I'm in Denver. When I travel for business, I always try to take a member of my family with me. A lot of times my kids. So we just went to Omaha. I took both of my older kids with me. On Friday night, and this is not my achievement, this is my wife's achievement, we have a family dinner and everybody gets together. So then in Friday, Friday, Saturday, we try to spend with kids together. I don't do any meetings really on Friday and Saturday. And so these things on the, like when, before we go to sleep, I usually play chess with my daughter, or we do puzzles or something. So I try, and by the way, what I did over time, it created relationships with my kids, where my oldest son, who is 24, he doesn't live at home, but I talk to him 3 times, and 2 or 3 times a day on the phone, sometimes more than that. And so it created this connection I have with my kids, which is incredibly important to me. If I didn't have this connection, it would be this giant hole in my life. Mm-hmm. So I think the most important insights is to know that if you have an obsessive personality, if you really love what you do, then you have to put guardrails where something you do automatic. Like even though it sounds kind of horrible, like it's not like I dread driving my daughter to school. It's the opposite. Actually, mm-hmm. I want to drive her to school. But a lot of times kind of your obsession takes over and pushes it away. Mm-hmm. So anyways, so that's how I do that.
Yeah, that sounds good. That reminds me of Aaron Adelheit, our mutual friend Aaron Adelheit's book about the hard break, and just saying, I'm going to do this. I'm going to take this kind of break, once a week, regardless, no matter what. And you make it automatic. It's very much like when you told me, you just said, I don't eat dessert, and explained to me that, you're just going to keep saying, I don't eat dessert, and that's going to be your thing. You don't eat dessert. And even if you cheat a little bit now and then, I don't eat dessert. And when you have this constant thing, it becomes it goes from being an automatic sort of mantra to being a reality. It's
like non-decision, right?
Yeah, right. Non-decision. Yeah,
decisions every day. Like like I'll give an example. You put a pack of cigarettes on the table next to me today. Mm-hmm. I don't smoke, so it requires zero energy from me not to smoke. If so that's like a decision I would make today, and so if I say I smoke sometimes, mm-hmm. then now it's a decision, isn't it?
Yep.
Even it's 1% of the time, mm-hmm. that 1% of the time is not worth it.
Right, and if you say sometimes, you're giving yourself a permission that you don't want to give yourself, because then 1% becomes 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, and you're smoking. So exactly. Yeah, No, it's a good point. And I when you told me that, I thought, yeah, that's right. Now I got lucky because I stopped drinking soda and I stopped drinking orange juice, both of which have sugar in them, and I lost 30 pounds like that because I lost a taste for them because I had surgery on my throat and it changed the nerves in my tongue. And when I got my taste back, these things that I drank every day didn't taste good. So I got really lucky that way. But at around the same time, you had told me about, the non-decision decision. And I thought, oh, that's just brilliant. And I stopped eating dessert for quite a while, actually, after that.
Oh, you look good. So so that really worked for you.
Right. So another thing, one of my decisions is, I exercise regularly.
Mm-hmm.
Period.
Well, so let me tell you what I do. I found personally that I have a willpower not to do things.
Mm-hmm.
So in other words, doing I stop drinking Coke and this kind of things.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't have that much willpower to do things.
Yeah.
So here's what I did, and I've been doing this now for 7 years. For a long time I tried to exercise, and I failed miserably. I joined gym. I would go to the gym for a month, and then and then 7 years ago I hired a trainer. He shows up at this office twice a week, Monday and Friday,
mm-hmm.
and for me it's an appointment on my calendar. It's a non-negotiable,
mm-hmm.
and that ensured that I work out twice a week. And that's been absolutely incredible. So
mm-hmm.
that basically, it's not that now he probably helped me to make sure that the dumbbell does not fall on my head or something, whatever. But that's not why he's there.
Right.
He's there to his job is actually just show up and basically kind of tell me, do this.
Yep.
It keeps you accountable, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Well, it's kind of like why Weight Watchers works, right? Because you get accountability.
I've heard that from absolutely every single person who has ever told me that they have a personal trainer. Every single one of them says the same thing. Well, he's really there just to tell me to do it. Every single one of them.
It's not it's kind of thing. It's not a logical thing. It's psychological.
Right.
It's really.
That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's funny. It's just a typical sort of a human thing. It's like admitting you need adult supervision and hiring an adult.
It's kind of funny. So if you think about it, investing is a lot more about psychology than anything else.
Yeah, I was going there too. Yep.
Yeah, and I remember reading books on behavioral finance, and I remember having this attitude that those are the books about other people,
mm-hmm.
not me. And then it took me a while to realize, oh no, those books are about me.
Yeah.
And so I probably I'm self-diagnosing myself all the time, self-analyzing. And I think if you're an investor and if you're self-analyzing yourself, it probably spills over into other parts of your life as well.
Right. You remind me of a book called Predictably Irrational by Dan Ariely.
Mm-hmm.
And someone was commenting on this book, and he was sort of making fun of it because you can know all these things about yourself and they don't change. And the guy said, well, I'm not predictably irrational because I read the book. But you still are. You'll always be predictably irrational, it's a very odd thing. And you mentioned the guardrails and the boundaries and your circle of competence. These are all the things that we need to do, aren't they?
My favorite saying is, knowing and not doing is not knowing. And I tell this myself all the time, just because I read the book. If I don't apply it, what difference does it make?
Yep. Absolutely. Knowing and not doing is not knowing. That's brilliant. I feel like I heard that from someone recently, but I can't place it. Do you know who said that originally?
You know what? Here's the thing. Here's what I discovered in this new book I'm writing,
mm-hmm.
that all quotes attributed to Mark Twain, Confucius, or some other ones, and they didn't say any of those things.
Yeah.
So if you want to take Confucius said it, that's fine. I'd say, like, really, it's just when we find, it's a lot of times it's just, I don't know where they come from. We can't really force ourselves to say it's anonymous or something.
Yeah.
And we just start attributing it to people. Yeah.
Confucius.
Well, as far as I'm concerned, you've said it first. That's the first I've heard it. So that's what I'm going to go with.
That's right.
It is amazing how many Mark Twain quotes I've come across in the last couple of years that are just not, you got to fact check them pretty hard. Yeah.
Yogi Berra had this perfect quote where he said, "I did not say everything I said."
That's a good one.
Because that's the same thing happened to him, right? Because he would, anytime something sounds something wacky, they say, "Oh, it's Yogi Berra said it."
Yeah, that self-contradictory style of his. Yeah. Nobody goes there anymore. It's too crowded.
Exactly.
All right. Well, I think my listeners will think poorly of me if I don't ask you if you have a particular publicly traded stock that you're excited about these days.
Wow. This is a tough one, and I really mean it, because it's been very difficult. It's been very difficult to find something I'm excited. Let me tell you, our second largest position today.
Okay.
Is this is going to show you the evolution of Vitaliy over the years. Is Uber.
Oh.
Okay, and so Uber is about, I don't know, $80-$85, something like this today. We see that the earnings in about 4 or 5 years, without really a lot of heavy lifting, are going to be around somewhere between, and I don't know, between $8 and $13 or so.
Mm-hmm.
So, this is a company that's. So I live in Colorado, and Colorado passed some kind of silly legislation that puts certain constraints on Uber. And when I took Uber to the airport, this thing comes up and says, "Keep Uber in Colorado, vote for this," or something. And I was thinking about this. If Uber was taken away from me today, my life would actually get a lot worse. And that's why this company is so and they're in the market where the winner gets the most, not everything. And I look at them and I say, yeah, they'll be around in 5 years and 10 years and 15 years. Some of, not all the rides are going to be, provided by drivers. There will be a lot of self-driving companies on the app. And it's an incredible company that I'm basically can probably own it for a long, long time. And yeah, it is not cheap statistically, but it is undervalued in my mind. So, and to fair disclosure, we owned it for 4 or 5 years. So, but when but we were buying it a month ago. So.
Oh, okay, interesting. Uber, I wouldn't have guessed that one.
Well, I figure I'll make it interesting for your people, for your listeners.
Right. Do you feel like talking about the business model a little bit, or no?
Yeah, sure. So what's interesting about the business model, right? It took them a long time to become profitable. Why? Because it's a both digital and analog company. Let me give you an example of a digital company like Facebook or Google, right? For them, going from Facebook going from United States to France required very little incremental cost, because all they had to do is translate website from English to French. For Uber to go into every single new market required huge analog costs. They had to fight local taxi commissions. They had to set up, hire drivers on all these different things. Mm-hmm. So it took them a long time to get to profitability because their fixed costs were higher. Mm-hmm. In addition to that, for a long time, they had to fight for market share because at the time when interest rates were very low, there was a lot of crazy money, a lot of crazy capital going into this market, and you had to do similarly irrational things to maintain your market share. Because at some point, when the capital goes away, whoever has the highest market share will keep that market share. So they had to do this. So when we bought it originally in January 2020, which is a great timing, except it's right in front of pandemic. Though in my defense, I did not know I was buying it before the pandemic. So, okay. So they basically turned the corner in the sense where the WeWork blew up, and so the venture capital money that was kind of funded the competitors went away, and I could see how and this key is very, very important. Every incremental dollar of revenue, 60% of that just went to bottom line. So in other words, the costs are fixed, and and we modeled it out, and I realized that over time, as the revenues continue to grow, the earnings will skyrocket. And that's exactly what happened, right? I mean, obviously, it was an interruption by pandemic. And you could argue pandemic actually helped them two ways. Number one, it's allowed the company to change its cost structure. It's very difficult to cut costs and rationalize things when things are doing okay. Pandemic gave them an excuse to really cut costs tremendously, because it's one of the few kind of digital companies, that really did not benefit from pandemic, at least on the taxi side, on the on the Uber side. Now they have benefited from Uber Eats. Uber Eats was basically kind of that market basically became significant overnight, and to my surprise, somewhat now it's actually profitable for them.
Wow.
What's also interesting,
that surprises me too.
Yeah, because they had density. Because now when you go to Chipotle to pick up a burrito, you may pick up 3 burritos and drop them off along the route. But what's also underappreciated about them is that they have a fairly significant, I forget the number, maybe a few $1 billion, and it's growing very fast, advertising business. Like, remember, the Amazon, one of the most profitable businesses for them, and they didn't, probably on par with the AWS, is advertising. Because as long as you have eyeballs, you're going to serve them, you're going to serve them ads.
Right.
So when you are on the Uber app, they can serve you ads from Home Depot or whatever. Also, when you go to Uber Eats, now restaurants are competing for the placement on the Uber Eats. So advertising comes with extremely high margin. It's probably 90% contribution margin. And overall, I think the margin may be close to 70% or so. So that's very profitable for them. And if you look at the Uber, financial for the last couple of years, as the revenues have been growing, their fixed cost, the costs kind of flattened out. And now that's why their earnings are growing at much faster rate than revenues. Now, there is a potential threat from self-driving, and so I have to address this. And this is a very nuanced point. There are several futures out there, different versions of futures. Okay, you may have let's say there's only Waymo and nobody else. That's one future. Or there could be multiple Waymo-like companies. Okay, the best outcome for Uber would be if there are multiple Waymos. Because it's not just Waymo is not the only company that ever figured out full self-driving. Okay, but let me give you the scenario why Waymo needs Uber, even if it's the only company out there. Here's why. Think about it. Waymo basically right now, they are buying cars. They're putting very expensive equipment on these cars, and so for them, asset utilization is very, very important. So, let's say they come to Denver. Waymo comes to Denver, and in Denver you have just to make the example simple, you have two type of demand. You have a peak time demand and like let's say 5 o'clock in the afternoon, and you have a 2 o'clock demand. Okay. At the peak, the demand is for 100 cars, and the low time demand is for 30 cars. Okay. So 100 cars, 30 cars. So Waymo now has a choice. If it has 30 cars, it's going to have 100% utilization throughout the day. At 2 o'clock, it can provide 30 cars. And at 5 o'clock, it can provide 30 cars. Except if at 5 o'clock, 70% of people will not be able to get a car, which would make the experience horrible. Okay, so this is high utilization, but horrible experience. So high returns in the short term, but not in the long term, because people would just stop using the app. The other extreme would be, they say, you know what? We want to make everybody happy. We're going to have 100 cars. So at the peak time, everybody's happy. Everybody gets a car. Everybody's happy. But at 2 o'clock, 70% of the cars are sitting and doing nothing. So they made a huge investment, and the return on investment is actually low. So they are maybe the long term they will be fine. Like long term, they will. The customer experience is good, but profitability of the company is actually not very good.
Right.
So this is where Uber comes in. Waymo can put itself on Uber's platform. And when you go on Uber's platform, like, today you have Uber, UberX, Comfort, Excel. There could be another one called self-driving. And self-driving is probably going to be cheaper. So whenever you go there and you see self-driving and say, let's say you go at 5 o'clock and you say self-driving, the wait is 40 minutes. You say, you know what? I'll just get UberX. And at 2 o'clock, you can see, I can get a self-driving in 5 minutes. I order self-driving. So Uber provides this platform where it's going to be hybrid for a long period of time. Now, if you get, let's say we are going, let's say you're going to have multiple Waymos, kind of like companies there, then Uber, it's better for Uber, because if Waymo is the only self-driving company, they arguably may have a larger bargaining power against Uber. But also what happens during that time is that because the price is lower, that creates a larger market. More people use it, because now instead of being $25, it's $15 or whatever. So Uber benefits whatever they lose in the dollar per transaction, they make up by number of transactions. Anyway, so this is kind of how I'm looking at this. So it's not a typical company for me to own, but whenever sometimes if I have an insight where I can look in the business and say, yes, I can see how this business is going to become even stronger 5 or 10 years from now. And I can see how as the revenues change, the contribution margin changes and the profitability changes. I can see, yes, may look expensive on today's earnings, but earnings 5 or 10 years out actually look very, it looks undervalued based on those earnings. That's when I bought it. And that's basically what I was thinking when we bought it, 5 years ago.
All right. That sounds great. Thanks for that. I think it's time.
A lot of interesting stuff there that I never thought about with Uber. It's cool.
Yeah, it is. It's good to hear the way you're thinking about things. It's time for our final question. Same question for every guest, no matter what the topic, even if it's a non-financial topic. And if you need time to think about it, that's fine. If you've already said the answer, feel free to repeat it. And the question is simply, for our listener, if you could give them just one takeaway, just one thought today, what would it be?
That is such a good question. Because that assumes I have like a menu of answers.
Yeah.
And I'm I think I may not even have one, but so let me see. I might have given you this answer before, but I think it's like as I get older, I appreciate it more and more.
Oh, that's fine.
And it's just and it's going to sound very banal, but for me, it was life changing because it just changed, kind of rewired who I am.
Mm-hmm.
It's kind of always be kind to everybody. And one thing I found, if I do this enough, I actually, what I think about myself is actually changes. It's like, so you're doing it, it's kind of funny. You're doing it for a selfish reason. You're doing it because at the end of the day, it comes back to you. And it comes back to you not because you've been kind to somebody and somebody will be kind back to you, and that as well. But I think it's actually changes of what you think of yourself. And to me, I am like paranoid of trying to be kind all the time. Like I get a telemarketer call me at 8:00 at night. I am kind to this person, and just because what it does, this consistency of behavior. It's our programming is kind of a subconscious programming is basically we are what we do all the time. Mm-hmm. It's very difficult for us being inconsistent, being kind to this person and not being kind to this person, and therefore I aim to be kind to everybody all the time. By the way, to be fair, I don't always succeed, but I try every time.
Right. Excellent. Yeah, we are what we repeatedly do, Aristotle. That's very wise.
Are you sure it's not Yogi Berra or
no, I'm sure. I read it in the book myself. So.
All right.
All right. Well, listen, man, it's always great to talk with you, and look forward to seeing you at this year's Value X in Vail.
Absolutely. I'm looking forward to seeing you.
All right. Thanks a lot.
Thank you very much, guys.
Thanks.